Okay, so now that I'm recording, brief review of what I've already talked about again. Competitors engage in competitive rivalry in order to gain advantageous market position, and have the screen switch on you. There's various competitive actions and defensive responses that are taken, and then all that adds up to be competitive dynamics in the industry. Competitive analysis consists in particular of market commonality and resource similarity, two criteria to examine about competing firms. Drivers of competitive behavior include awareness, motivation, and ability. There's two different positions that can be taken in a competitive rivalry: an attack posture and a response posture, each of which have certain factors which tend to encourage them to happen. And then all of that ends up resulting in market performance, which feeds back into new competitive analysis. So it's important to understand who your competitor is and how you compete with them. Market commonality, so the demand from customer needs for your products and services, how much that's common with another competitor. And the extent, resource similarity, the extent to which you and a competitor use the same suppliers of tangible and intangible resources. So we talked a little bit about competitor, this matrix format of market commonality on one axis and resource similarity on another axis, and having a quadrant here where competition is particularly intense, and a quadrant in the lower right-hand corner or lower left-hand corner, which is particularly low rivalry, and then in the upper left-hand and lower right-hand corners, a moderate amount of rivalry. We talked about a number of factors that influence likelihood of attack: being a first mover, being a late mover, organizational size, product quality, and whether there's a fast versus slow cycle of product development in the marketplace. Things that impact the likelihood of a defensive posture instead of an offensive posture are when all companies in an industry are subject to challenge in the same way. And those defensive strategies tend to lower the risk of being attacked, weaken the impact of an attack, and influence challengers to aim their attacks at other rivals. Blocking an attack, there's a number of ways to block an attack. They're listed here. I went over them earlier. And that was the first section of the lecture on both competitive balance in a marketplace and likelihood of attack, likelihood of response, two topics in particular. Market positioning maps. I was starting to go over this. One of the most common ways of comparing competitors in an industry, you want to have differentiable X and Y axes. Some of the common criteria to use for your X and Y axes in a market positioning map are listed here. And then that gets us back to the current slide now that I've clicked record on the machine here. This is an example of a market positioning map for the auto industry with price, performance, and reputation, which all tend to be correlated with each other, listed on the y-axis, and model variety, so the number of different types of models of cars that each competitor has on the x-axis. So you can see here, companies like Porsche and Ferrari tend to have really high quality cars, but only have a couple models. There's not like 16 different models of Ferrari. BMW and Mercedes tend to be a little bit, have a few more models than Porsche and Ferrari, but they're also relatively high priced. Volkswagen and Honda tend to have about the same number of models as BMW and Mercedes, but they are at a lower price point. Toyota tends to be at that same price point but have more models. Hyundai and Suzuki tend to have low cost and a low number of models. That's their position in the market, is to have just a few types of models that are really cheap. Nissan, Chrysler, and Mazda tend to be cheap but have a medium range of number of models, and then GM and Ford tend to have a lot of models of cars, all of which are relatively cheap. So this is one way to distinguish competitors in a marketplace. We'll talk about some others as well when we go into discussion here in a second. Dimensions of goods and services for your market positioning maps. Quality and service. So product quality and service quality have a number of different features to them that you could use on your market positioning map. When you're talking about product quality, could be performance, so the operating characteristics of certain products. Features, important special characteristics of your product or service. Flexibility, meeting operating specifications over some period of time. Durability, so the amount of use before performance deteriorates, how long the product can go without having to be replaced. Conformance, matching with pre-established standards, so the extent to which your product actually matches with the standards for performance of products in your industry. Serviceability, if it's easy and speedy to repair, that's another thing that's important for product quality. Aesthetics, how a product looks and feels. And perceived quality, subjective assessment of characteristics. So this is the brand image of a product and how it's perceived quality-wise. For service quality, you've got timeliness, so whether services are performed in a reasonable period of time. Courtesy, are your people that are delivering the service doing it cheerfully? Consistency, do all customers that get your service have the same experience or a similar experience each time? Convenience, is your service accessible to customers? Completeness, is the service delivered completely as required, in full? And accuracy, is the service performed correctly each time? So all of those are sub-criteria that you could use for a market positioning map to distinguish between competitors. There's two other slides here that I want to go over that are from an organization called SCORE. SCORE stands for Service Corps of Retired Executives. It's basically a consulting organization where people that used to be executives of companies and have retired volunteer their time to consult with various small businesses. So one way of comparing competitors to each other is to compare assets of competitors rather than looking at product quality or service quality or other factors, to look at the assets that each company possesses. So first of all, you need to identify who are the competing businesses and determine what are the key information and sources that you're going to draw on. And then finally, you're going to collect information to do that assessment of assets based on pricing, benefits and features, size and profitability, brand image, and some other factors as well. the full version of this tool looked kind of like this. You've got a number of rows for products, price, quality, selection, service, reliability, stability, expertise, company reputation, location, appearance, sales method, credit policies, advertising, image. And then you first of all list how your business performs in each of these areas. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And then assess the performance of different competitors, A, B, and C, on the same factors, and then determine the importance to the customer of each of these factors. That's going to determine which things you focus on more and less in your competitive activities. Jennifer requested that we have time for review today instead of a lecture. So I've got a brief discussion that I want to go through, and then that'll be it for today, so you guys have extra time to study. So market commonality and resource similarity. I'm curious. Before I pick a name out of the hat, who wants to assess the market commonality, resource similarity of the industry that you work in right now? Can somebody give me an example? Yes, Alyssa.
I was involved in instant oil change, so it's like.
Hang on one second.
Okay.
Say again.
I work at Valvoline, instant oil change, so I guess like automotive. It's like oil changing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So if we've got, who's one of the competitors of Valvoline?
It would be the dealerships or like
Jiffy Lube. Okay, this is a good example. So market commonality. High and low, and resource similarity, high and low. So, would you say that Valvoline and Jiffy Lube target the same customers, or do they have different customer bases?
different.
Different customer bases?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's going to put us down in the low part of the matrix here. And then, do they have the same resources as companies? Are they very similar types of companies, or are they different types of companies in the resources that they have?
I think a little different. I think Valvoline it's been around longer and it's like nationwide. So I think it's a little different.
Okay, so in that case, there's not that much resource. There's not that much competitive overlap between Valvoline and Jiffy Lube. So they're competitors, but not as intensive competitors as there are in some other industries.
Or I don't know, maybe I think they are competitive. It's just the price that's like the difference. Because our prices are more expensive, but it's a way better service, like more quality. So maybe they are different.
No, I think your assessment originally was right.
Okay.
I mean, Valvoline is the manufacturer of the oil in addition to providing services. Jiffy Lube doesn't do that. There's different resources between the two companies, and I would imagine that Valvoline, in addition to performing oil change services, also targets selling oil to people. And Jiffy Lube doesn't sell oil; they just change things.
Oh,
so
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I think you're right. How about competitive attack and defense posture? Who can give me an example of a company that you work for that you think usually goes on the attacking posture rather than the defensive posture? Anyone? Diego, what do you think?
I wanted to raise my hand, but I don't think my job qualifies for this kind of thing. I work as a substitute teacher.
Say again?
I work as a substitute teacher for this, so I'm not really competing with anybody.
But think about the school systems, and particularly private schools versus public schools. There's a competition between schools for where the kids go to school. So.
Well, yeah, I guess I would be part of the industry. Yeah, I guess I would be the only form of competition that the school could have. I mean, I guess I can compete with other schools because you can technically take your kid anywhere else. You don't have to keep them at that particular school.
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess in this case, competitive attack and defense is like you have the best possible program for the kid in that school. And competitive attack is kind of like do community outreach and kind of get that other parents involved in your school more so they don't jump ship to another school. That make sense?
It does make sense.
Yeah, that's
It
the
does
only
make
way I
sense.
think that it would work.
Okay.
Because I taught preschool for like 2 days, right?
Hmm?
And because I was in grades, I did preschool recently.
Uh-huh.
And it's a state-run preschool, and they actually do compete with the other daycare facilities that are there. But yeah, so I noticed they actually have like a business style setup, which is different. But I mean, that's the only example I can think on that.
Okay.
Because they get money based on the student instead of being funded.
So, would you say that the public, you work for the public school, right?
Yes.
So would you say that the public school is bigger than some of the private schools, or are the private schools just as big?
No, public's better.
Yeah, so
Because they get money per student.
I would think that the public school is less likely to attack private schools as vice versa. The private schools are smaller. They don't have the same state funding, so they're more likely to be attacking than the public schools.
Yeah, public school is more like making sure the kids don't leave for the most part.
Yes. So even though you didn't think it's an example, it is one.
Yeah. Harder in the public field.
So that was that. So the last thing I wanted to discuss is market positioning maps. So who can give me an example of one of the companies in your industry and one of its competitors, and choose some axes to compare the two on? Yes.
Let's say, for example, I'm not sure if this is the company that we're going to do, but just to give an example, you could compare like Apple and Samsung.
Yep. So what are we going to compare them on?
So it's quality and price for market positioning maps.
Quality. If we use quality and price, we're going to put them on the same axis because price and quality. Do you have your hand up?
Yes, product maybe?
Yes. So if we put product on one axis and price, quality. So what is the difference between Apple's products and Samsung's products?
It's a more intuitive design.
Yes.
Quality.
Huh?
The difference is quality for Samsung that map.
Is there a difference in quality?
Yes.
Samsung has better specs. Yes. Hardware.
Samsung has better hardware?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think.
So
Apple is more stable because of their software and the way everything flows with.
say again.
I said, the Apple is more stable because of their software.
So product stability. You said Apple is more stable?
Yeah, probably because of their in-house software.
And is Apple more or less expensive than Samsung? Or are they the same?
More.
So Apple is going to be up here, high product stability and high price. Nope. And Samsung is going to be back here some more.
But what if price is like not, what if price and quality don't match up? Because every once in a while you get
Those products that are expensive that are crappy quality, or vice versa.
Usually, expensive products that are crappy quality don't last that long in the marketplace, so it's not a stable comparison to make on the market positioning map. Yes.
I think what also helps is that
Hang on, I saw another hand.
I'll put Samsung like right up there with Apple and quality is just the price point like $50 to $100.
well, I would say Samsung makes different. They also make low and high end phones. Like they have like the J3 or something that's like $150.
Say again.
The Samsung makes different types of quality phones. Like they have some phones for 100, and then they have like the most expensive phones for like what 900.
And does Apple have the same range of prices?
No.
So another way to distinguish the competitors could be,
They could cater to those who can't afford a very expensive phone.
it could be, yes, another way to distinguish them could be range of models.
Yeah.
So if we did range of models, Apple would be over here with a high price, and Samsung is out here more at a lower price. Yes.
Can you go over the distinction why you placed price and quantity on the y-axis as opposed to just price and quality in the y and x-axis respectively?
Yes, I can. Because if except for the examples, the example that Jennifer gave of crappy products that have a high price,
Right.
usually if you have low product quality, what kind of price do you have?
You have a low price.
And if you have high product quality, what do you have? And medium? So the graph is always going to look like this, so it doesn't tell us anything we don't already know.
Okay, I understand.
That's why not put them on the same axis,
Right.
not to put them on different axes.
Understand.
Make sense?
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I was just gonna say, if you go to like if you take like car companies for example, a lot of times you'll see like crappy cars that are marked up to look like they're nice cars. Like, I mean, I don't know very much about cars. I'm just saying from what my fiance says. But there are those times where people just like the brand, or like clothing, like people just like the brand. So the clothing's super, super expensive, but in reality, the quality isn't that great. You know what I mean? So would it be acceptable to do like a thing like this if that were the case?
Sure. If that's the case, then yeah, you can. It's usually not the case, but if it is the case, then yes, you could do it that way. Other comments that I missed? Okay, that was a nice sort of mini discussion of the 3 topics on competitiveness and competitive rivalry. Since you guys have an exam on Thursday, and it was requested that we have extra study time for the exam, I'm done with my lecture for today. You guys can use the rest of the time to prep for Thursday. Okay? Okay.